don't think anything will ever be like it was again.
No. It will be better.
It's such a dream project. I was a kid who loved the Dark Crystal, who loved Labyrinth, who loved that stuff so much. I would draw in all my notebooks pictures of mystics. We had a project, I remember, in 7th grade art class. We had to make a puppet, and this is true, made a mystic. And I took a month longer than anybody else. Everybody else was long done, and I was still like, I'm not, until I finished the mystic. I made it at a mystic pace, because I was so when Will and I, our writing partners, we had started to sell some projects and be able to do some things. We had an idea for Labyrinth 2, and Will was like, what's the point of what we've done? So we sort of just called up Henson. Our agent just called up Henson and said, you don't know these guys. They have an idea for Labyrinth 2. Do you want to meet with them? And they said, no, we don't want to do Labyrinth 2, but we're doing Dark Crystal. And so it was purely the luck of the moment and we just went in and pitched our little hearts out and kind of won the job. And then after we wrote the pilot and we got the green light, that was when Javi came in, because we had never even worked on a television show before. We'd never been in a writer's room. And suddenly we were supposed to kind of be in charge of it. So they're like, let's bring in somebody to do that with you who's done it before. And that can go bad sometimes. Like, you hear stories about that going bad. And it went awesome. Javi is amazing and gracious, and his voice and his talent is wrapped up in this show and is such a big part of it, but also taught us how to put a schedule together. Like, somebody's like, put a schedule together. How? Oh, okay. And then you turn to Javi and say how. But he's made a lot of his work in his, not just his creative talent, but also in his professional endeavors to help writers. And that's such a thing that Javi does. And he's so kind and so generous. And then he was just awesome. And now there's all this amazing writing. And then he's a really amazing writer, too. I don't want to undersell that. But you really have to understand how afraid in that moment when they like make a schedule. And we were like, yeah. And we smiling on. Fake it till you make it. And so we, spent a lot of months together in a room with our amazing staff and wrote these scripts. And so we're just very, very proud of it.
So my story, I had just worked on the show The 100, and I was between jobs, and I got a call from my agent also saying there's a job at the Jim Henson Company. And I'm like, all right. And I'm like, what is it? And they're like, we can't tell you. And I'm like, you can't? They're like, no, it's top secret. I'm like, all right, so what am I doing? And they're like, go to the Jim Henson Company tomorrow at 2. So I go there, and I'm literally leaving my car, and another producer from The 100's coming back, right? And I look at her, and I'm like, did you just take the meeting I'm going to take? And she's like, I think I did. And I'm like, can you tell me what it is? She's like, signed an NDA. I'm like, is it a good meeting? She goes, it's a really good meeting. So then I go in, and Lisa Henson hands me an NDA, right? And I signed the NDA, and then you guys had written a 5-minute trailer for the show that was sort of a proof of concept, and I watched it, and look, this story, on the inside, I broke into tears, literally. Like, I was, it was like my childhood, my lost innocence, like, was all of a sudden on Lisa Henson's iPhone,
Yeah, but from people in the room, my understanding it was also on the outside, too.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me.
I think you tell the story, and you're like, nobody could tell. And then everybody else in the room was like, so Javi cried. It was amazing.
The phrase I heard was heaving sobs.
Yeah.
We either need to hire him immediately or ask him to leave.
Yes. And what happened was the restraining order didn't come through before my deal did, so there you go.
Lawyers work faster than the court system once again. Yeah.
But the truth is, that's how everyone on this project has been. It's a labor of love for everyone. The writers, the director, all of the crew, all of the craftspeople who can do these amazing costumes, these puppets. The finest detail is done by someone who loves this world, who loves this property.
And Lisa Henson loves this world and knows this world. And she'll come in and she knows it. She knows all of the history. She knows all of the different property, the different sort of IP that's been involved in the Dark Crystal. And so you better know it too. And we had long discussions about Gelfling politics and the hierarchy, leather and how they make leather, and do they make leather? Well, they wouldn't make leather because they're
vegetarians.
So it's like, how do they find these things to make what is clearly leather? And so everybody loves it. And Louis was amazing. Louis directed all 10 episodes, operates the camera, was in the writer's room with us a lot of the time, and was just there and involved the whole step of the way through. Louis has the most energy of anybody I've ever met, and having somebody to direct all 10 is a gift, is amazing, because it's such a hard show to make, to shoot. And he was just literally in the trenches, strapped into a camera. So when the puppeteers were like, "I'm tired," Louis could be like, literally strapped into a camera, "Me too," and just keep going. And so it was this amazing experience for the whole way through of just, like you said, everybody loved it.
I want that as a GIF, by the way.
But
How would you describe Louis' directing? For
Which is
your
in no
consideration.
He's like
in no way what he looks like on set. He's like a tall, like
he's
like
a tall,
lion.
handsome
I'm doing
Frenchman.
Chris
Yes.
Farley,
Yeah.
like big guy in a little coat, which is the opposite of Louis Leterrier.
Do you remember when I directed that? No.
Yeah. Louis on set.
So the first 2 months we worked on the show, nobody knew the show was being made. So we were working in secrecy, right? And then the first, so Netflix put out a trailer announcing the show, and it was a trailer with archival footage of Jim Henson and some footage from this 5-minute teaser that they showed me. And literally people, like, just in apropos of how much everybody who works on the show is a true believer, literally people started to come out of the woodwork to ask us, and like, for example, can I say the name of the one guy who called us? Because he's on the show, yeah. So literally,
Can you say it?
yeah.
I don't know. They have so many rules.
Oh my God, no. So literally, so we're sitting in the office, and then Louis comes in and says, "Well, Andy Samberg called, and he wants to meet." And we're like, "About what?" Show's not written yet, and he's like, "He just wants to meet." And we're like, "We'll meet Andy Samberg." That's it. So Andy Samberg comes in, and he has a voice part in the show finally. And it's one of those things where, like, he literally came in, but this was before, like, we were just starting to build puppets, and it's like he comes in and he tells us all about how much he loved the Dark Crystal and and he wants to be involved in any way he can. He's like, "I'll push a broom." We're like, "I'm sure we can find something else for you to do."
I'm sure we can find something better. Well, we did make him push a broom for a while. He was really good at it.
I mean, shockingly good at sanitation.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that when the comedy world won his talent, the world of sanitation lost something. It's weird, but I don't know.
But that's what it. I mean, and we've got the Frouds, Brian Frouds working on the show, Wendy Froud working on the show. Toby, their son, is the head creature designer. So you've got 2 generations of Froud all working together in the creature shop, surrounded by these puppets, making things from hand, and it's incredible. We had some of the original puppeteers came back. A lot of the people who worked on it came and visited. It felt very much like you were a part of this amazing legacy. It was incredible. There's actually 3 moments, I would say. One is when you see them start to be sculpted in the creature shop is an amazing moment, because you're in one of those photos that used to see behind the scenes stuff, right? And suddenly you're there and you're seeing the sculptors, and the work that they do is incredible. So that's like a moment that is overwhelming when they start to line up these like sculpts is incredible. And then there's the moment that you see the tests and the puppeteers first put them on and bring them to life. And that's where you're seeing them, oh, this is incredible. And then there's the moment that you get under the lights and onto the set. And there's a moment when you get onto the lights and set that you're like, this is incredible, but then you're right into work, if that makes sense. So I actually have much stronger memories of those first 2, and then by the third being like, oh, wait, what are we doing? What's going on? Because it was the first day. It was the first thing. And so it's actually those 3 moments for me of tracing the character from the first time you see it, first time you see it come to life, and the first time you see it in Thra.
One of the interesting things about the show, if you remember the movie, and I assume you do because you're here talking to us, there's a lot of shots in the movie that are location shots. Like they put a young boy in a Gelfling costume and he's running around the British countryside, and you take it as part of the artistry of the film. But for the show, they built something about 80 sets. 89 sets, and they were in 2 buildings the size of football fields that also housed a creature shop, a full construction thing. I mean, it was massive. And for me, the version, because we were there for the evolution of the puppets. So we saw them get designed, we saw them get sculpted and all that. So for me, it was, Will and I actually walked in together the first time on the set, and it's one of those things where you are transported into like one of those old Hammer movies, where like everything is shot indoors, even the forest is an indoor, and you look at this and it is like you're in Thra, and Thra isn't, nobody's gonna go like, oh, they shot that in Yorkshire, everything in this world is fabricated, and it is fabricated to a degree that is like inhumanly detailed.
I remember a moment early on in the creature shop. We were working on a new kind of Skeksis. It was going to move differently from all the other ones. And they had half built the way to do it. It was barely half. And they put it on a puppeteer, and I'm watching him put it on the puppeteer, and I know the puppeteer, I'm watching him put it on the puppeteer, and all of a sudden, it was on, and he just looked at me and started running, and I screamed in the middle of the shot.
We have it on film. I don't know if it'll ever see the light of day, but yeah, we have that moment.
So that was the moment it came alive for me, and I thought this show's going to do pretty good.
I just remember you like, oh, I did not like that. I did not like that. Like very serious.
But then there was another moment in the costume shop where the woman in charge of the costume shop was showing me the different wigs for the three sisters. And she was showing me just the hair. And each was braided differently, specific to tell the story of that sister. And I thought, not only did they read the scripts, but they got it, and they cared enough to braid the hair. It's the back of the head. You'll never see it. But the hair tells the story of the character. That's how much these people care.
Yeah.
Yes, the show opens with a written exam. It's very detailed trivia questions.
Yeah.
Skek, Skek, Tex,
Yeah.
You got to know all the
Skexo, yeah, all of them. You got to name all the Skeksis.
all the Skeksis.
Yeah, and the Mystics.
And
Yeah.
all the Mystics as well, yeah.
No, we really wanted the show to play for everyone, people who watch the movie often, people who have never even heard of it, people who think it's actually the one with David Bowie.
It's not?
Oh, Javi.
Oh, man.
Get that, what I would tell people what we were working on, if I'd be in a cab, I was in London for like a year, I'd be in a cab and they'd be like, what are you doing? What are you working on? And I would say, and they'd be like, oh, the one with David Bowie. And I'd be like, no, the other one. And they go, oh. And then one guy said the best thing ever. He goes, with the dinosaurs and dresses? And I was like, that's it, with the dinosaurs and dresses.
You're like, yes.
So we will often call it the show with the dinosaurs and dresses.
But never on camera.
Yeah,
No. I always thought of them as turtle raptors rather than I don't know.
That was another term that we used. But no, he's right. We really strove to make this something that was very accessible to any audience coming in. That you could come into this show, come into this world, and we spent a lot of time talking about what was the best way to bring you into a world that's so big and so complicated and has a lot of pieces. Manga, the YA novels, the original film, the world of the Brian Froud's work, and so we really wanted to. That was a big discussion. How do we bring you in?
We also live in a post Game of Thrones, post Lord of the Rings world, so the tropes of fantasy are a lot more familiar to the audience. So even though we're doing a prequel, so this is going to be your chance to be introduced to this world before the events of the movie, and to know this world. You could watch the movie after seeing the show, and you're going to have a complete experience. If you've seen the movie, then you know kind of where we're headed towards. But the world has a different attitude toward fantasy than it did in 1982. When all you had was Excalibur, the Sword and the Sorcerer, and a couple of biblical epics from the 50s. So the audience has a much greater facility with this kind of material too. I think for us, it was actually important to tweak the hero's journey a little bit. The original is a very sort of linear film that really follows the hero's journey in a very specific way. And I think the big challenge for us was to try to take some of those steps and mix them up a little bit so that you didn't look at the show and say, oh, we're just doing this very straight line. Also, the movie is, under 2 hours long, and it's one character story. We strove to have the narrative density of Game of Thrones in this show. So you're not just seeing one story about one character going on a trip. You're seeing an entire civilization in the full flush of its glory when it was prospering, and you're seeing all of these Gelfling clans and all of this stuff. So we have more than one main character going on a lot of separate journeys, coming together, coming apart, and all of that. So it's a much more involved endeavor, I think. Favorite creature race in the... Okay, yeah. Can I talk about Will and Jeff?
About those characters?
Yeah, okay, can I say what they are?
No, you got to just say... You can say there's two.
Yeah, there is a new race in the show. I mean, there's a lot of new types of creatures in the show, but there's this race of, these kind of, servile animals. They're like servile. They're like goblins.
Yeah.
And they become the henchmen of one of the Skeksis characters, and they look like the saddest little potato lump people ever, and they're phenomenal. But not like podlings. They just look like weird potato lizards.
But
they're
they
the best.
named those puppets Will and Jeff. So which we always thought was. And when you see the show, you'll see just how brutal that is.
We knew a little more about the story. So I think they meant it as a nice thing, and we were like, "Oh, that reminds you of us, huh?"
that's good. What's yours?
I love the Skeksis. I just love them. I love Chamberlain. I love the Scientist. I love the Emperor. I mean, they're so bad. Anything you write for them works. You believe anything they say. I love the Skeksis.
I'm going to have to say Skeksis too, and I know it's a boring answer. He just said it better than me, but he's right. If you put a group of them in a room and write for them, you can go forever. And some of the most fun stuff to write is just the background stuff that they say, because we have to script all that so we can record it to match mouths, and like there's a lot of work. And so even that background stuff that you can barely hear is some of my favorite writing. And I'm not sure you can hear any of it. It's sort of a Dolby mix, but like some of the side conversations that Skeksis have are amazing.
It's a lot of the world building that goes. A lot of the world building that goes into the show is actually it's the things the characters say to each other that aren't necessarily germane to the plot. Like there's one point where one of the Skeksis says, "Ooh, that's my favorite ocular castigation," and it's like, what does that mean? You know? And you hear them, but there's so many times when you hear them talking about just stuff they do that you don't see, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, you can build that world.
Yeah.
There you go.
so much.
Thank you.
This is a treat. So.
It was a pleasure. It was all ours. Thank you.
Talk more.
I don't know.
Speed round. Here's some things I don't like about Jeff.
Okay. Favorite creature race.
What?
Whoa.
I know.